Yeah, it's unfortunate that the left has been so successful in radicalizing the people from their perspective. Of course, we don't know exactly what the motivations were because it's just come out today that apparently this is a young guy who is in a Mormon household, it appears, allegedly. And then people are thinking that he went to college and got sort of liberalized there. We don't know. It's all sort of still up in the air. The weirdest part right now, though, is that everybody is trying to frame it according to who they want to be the bad guy. And every time there's one of these big events, that always happens. Every single mass event like this, even though the last several have been TRANZ, I initially thought this was going to be some sort of racial thing because of the event with the arena girl. I assumed this was some sort of like round two, provocation, agitation. Again, we don't know for sure, but it does look, there's a lot of different oddities, questions that are arising that people are asking that I think are fair questions. But also, I've watched these kinds of mass events for 20 years, and it's very important to be measured and not jump to conclusions because the narratives will shift and there will be new details and whatnot, and things will probably be covered up, especially with something being apparently high profile. It looks to me like there were things that make it more than a single individual, but that's my opinion. I don't know why there would be people sort of deflecting and distracting and things like that if this was just some lone gunman. But we know that, just like with JFK, the lone gunman narrative has been very popular and been a consistent pattern with these high profile events that only get questioned decades later. But nowadays, in the age of the internet, it's questioned right away. I also see parallels that not many people are talking about, except for one other person, to the way Gladio was run. If you read the Gladio literature, and I'm well aware that Gladio was a right-wing, so-called opposition, false flag operation to the Soviets and to the NKVD, but the strategy of tension in the Gladio operations included cells and networks that would set off things just like this. Mass events, shall we say. We know about the Bologna event. That was part of Gladio. And Gladio, again, included high-profile unalivings. So those patterns are studied and they're used and repeated for these types of events. We know that there's parallels also to the Trump event. Whatever you think of the Trump event, there seems to be certain parallels there. And it doesn't matter whether the individual himself is right or left wing. That can all be kind of tailored and created and crafted. He may have been a right winger. He may have been a social justice warrior from college. The things that are inscribed supposedly on the bullets do suggest perhaps a anti-fascist ideology, but again, it's unclear because he might have been trolling. Some of the other inscriptions, if you read this, you're gay, which again sounds like kind of just a joke and trolling.
Sounds like a tweet on a,
Right. So it's unclear exactly, but there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that don't add up, just like a lot of these high-profile events. People are saying, oh, he couldn't do that. Well, if he's from a hunting and fishing family, you could conceivably do that. But that doesn't mean that he didn't still have help. And if you guys remember, we did interview, right after the Trump event, we interviewed Sammy the Bull, the most famous living hitman. And he described his pattern for how he would organize these types of events. And he would say that there would always be a person who was sort of the dupe that thought they were part of the event or part of the operation that was the designed patsy. They think they're on the inside, they think they're part of a team, but they're actually the one that's being set up. And we see that with people like Mr. T. McVeigh, if you know about that event and how that went down. We see that with perhaps people in the Big Nine event, particularly Saudis and other people who were perhaps thought that they were part of an operation, but ended up perhaps being the useful idiots. So a lot of times these operations use useful idiots if you study them in detail. So, but anyway, it will probably be, I don't know, but my guess is they'll either craft it to say that it was a right-wing gun nut who thought that Charlie Kirk was not right wing enough, or
not anti-Israel enough.
Exactly,
really.
or he's going to be, he was liberalized at college and decided he was pro-trans and that he wanted to rebel, and this is some way to rebel or whatever, and that will echo well with the events that the left likes to kick off. That's why I've been talking about the Podesta plan. If you remember, he put that in the New York Times about what would happen if there was a Trump win, that the left would try to sort of kick off throughout all their NGOs and their networks and their think tanks this type of BLM violence stuff, color revolution type stuff, but not just the strategy of peaceful color revolution actually kicking off violence. And if you know about color revolution in the Ukraine, that kicked off with a sniper. The situation in Syria also kicked off with a sniper event. So a lot of times the sniper event is another key thing to try to kick off a big social traumatic response or reactionary response. That's all the time in color revolution type stuff. Most of the color revolution stuff isn't intended to be violent, but the sniper event is one of the key things that kicks it off. And it was, I think in the case of the Ukraine, it was a Ukrainian sniper that actually kicked that off. So color revolutions do include these types of violent events, and you could look at BLM and that kind of stuff as our version of a color revolution in America. It's not identical to the Orange Revolution, but it's similar.
To me, so I can also post it on my thing because my people can't see it.
Yeah, I'm going to play a clip that is a good example of the mindset and the types. I'll send it to you. Okay. The types of people that are on the left.
Far left will not and cannot ever stop. They didn't stop when the Popular Front won elections. They didn't stop when the minor revolt was violently put down by the military. They didn't stop after Franco's failed coup. They didn't stop with their red terrors. They didn't stop once they got the means of production. They didn't stop when nationalists retook Republican territory. They only stopped once Franco physically removed them. During the Spanish Civil War, Franco commissioned his chief psychiatrist, Antonio Bajero Nájera, to study the personality of communists from the Republic and the International Brigades. Vallejo's work represents one of the few documented cases of scientific research aimed at classifying political dissidents within the framework of biopsychological pathologies. He did not consider communists as mentally ill people, but as subjects who had innately inferior and degenerative psychological characteristics. These prisoners were characterized by degenerative temperaments, mediocre intelligence, and held innately revolutionary social personalities. In certain political environments, they will turn into vigorous defenders of the most indefensible persuasions. It is these clumsy, unspontaneous beings that make up the majority of the gregarious mass of anonymous people. He found that social resentment, frustrated aspirations, and envy were at the sources of Marxism, which were typical attributes of the followers of anti-fascism and other leftist ideologies. Vallejo stated that these traits were enhanced in female prisoners due to the psychological inferiority of their sex. He concludes that the probability of obtaining a positive change in the political attitude of such individuals was very low. The nationalists were up against communistoids, a degenerate and inferior class of people that can barely be described as human.
There's this massive amount of resentment and envy, like the video said, that characterizes most of these people. There was a video going around, I shared it, of the black guy that used to be conservative, the amazing Lucas guy who's now a BLM grifter. And in his video he says, just a little message to y'all white people from the black community, we don't care about y'all, okay? I don't care about some white woman getting killed.
Are you talking about Charlie White?
No, his name's Amazing Lucas. He used to be a conservative, and now he's a BLM grifter. And I shared his video. It was going viral because he says that, like, if this happens to you, it doesn't matter because oppression. It's always because oppression.
Oh, right.
So what happens is, as I pointed out on Twitter, because they have a dual ethic, they believe that they're justified in anything that they do because of oppression. So what happens is that this actually appeals to a criminal class. The criminal class catches on to this. Then they realize they can be part of a revolution and justify criminality by linking up with this supposed ideology. That's why in the French Revolution, they emptied the jails and let the criminals be the force on the ground for the revolution. Guess what? The Bolsheviks did the exact same thing. They emptied out the jails and let the criminals run free as the street force, foot soldiers of the revolution. But in reality, they're just criminals using a opportune situation to act like they're revolutionaries, which is why many of these people are the dark triad traits, as that paper I always refer to points out. Virtuous victimhood and the dark triad traits. You'll notice that in a society that values and promotes weakness, so-called democracy, equalitarianism, cunning and psychopathic people catch on to that, and they utilize victim status to get currency, to get attention, to get status, and then turn on the host population that they're victimizing.
This is important because I do want to talk about this. Kirk was starting to turn on our ally. This is true. Actually, let me play this video with Tucker Carlson when he went on Charlie Kirk. We can respond to this here.
He was one of the only people, I mean, truly one of the only people to go to the president whom he loved. He loved Donald Trump, like personally as well. And I think the president really loved him in a real way. But he was one of the only people to go to the Oval Office and say, sir, I totally understand and think Iran's really bad, but a war with Iran is not, is something that could really hurt our country. I mean, boy, that was an unpopular position. He didn't need to express it. Oh, of course. And he did it again. He didn't have some weird agenda. He wasn't mad at anybody. He was for his country, and he was for doing the right and wise and difficult thing. And he said that. He went to the Oval Office to say that. He took massive abuse from his own donors, which is also something that you don't see people. And he loved his donors. It wasn't a hostile thing, but they had a different view. A lot of them, not all, but a lot. And they expressed it to him in a very intense way. I know because he showed me. And he said, look, I understand your perspective. This is my perspective, and we're going to do what we think is the right thing, the wise thing.
In that way, too, he was the voice of young people. I mean, there are no young people in the country anymore supporting this war and wanting Israel to continue its bombing campaign. That's just the truth. Look at the polls. And he was in touch with them. And even where his own opinion may have differed from their opinion, he felt like he owed it to them to bring their message to the sitting president of the United States. I mean, it was that's what's been snuffed out.
Yeah. So
well, as he has been, unfortunately.
Really tragic situation, right? Because see, I'm not buying their story, and I don't understand you people who don't trust the government for anything, right? And then as soon as they come out with the story where they're like, oh, look, it was a white Christian from a hunter and farming fishing thing, and he got away. He made sure he got away, but then he went to his Discord group chat and confessed everything. And you're like, okay, case closed. Like, what's wrong with you? I had a theory that he was starting to show signs that Netanyahu did not want to risk. I don't know if he was going to turn. I don't know if he was ever going to go full. But I think there were enough signs for somebody who's paranoid to not want to risk it. That's enough. Okay? And we have issues. We can't just wrap this up neatly. What kind of lone gunman has a couple of patsies in the crowd, diversions, pretending to be the shooter, like this guy, George Zinn? Let's play this real quick. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but apparently George Zinn, there's a video, an old video of this guy. How do these people show up at this, when something like this happens, where you have somebody who's making a video and saying it was Al-Qaeda who did 9/11, and then they're showing up at another thing right before 9/11. You can't just ignore coincidences and be like, I guess just a coincidence. There's no such thing, truly. So there's that. There's the plane that took off an hour after and then shut off its radar, and it was connected to a guy who made tremendous donations to Shabbat Lubavitch in Utah. These are untied, open-ended problems. And we can't just accept a simple narrative that a nice Indian, Kash Patel, has put together. He's not even smart enough to construct a good lie. And it takes them 33 hours, magical number, it takes them 33 hours to find this guy. Let's just